Well, not really. But, okay, so this is Miss Dean, and this is Jerry's mom, and she's got some really great things to say for us tonight. So you guys can all just like be quiet and listen.
Thank you. Okay, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask some questions to Mrs. Elder, who, as you know, is also known as Jerry's mom. Okay. So, the first question is, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you know, I'm Jerry's mom. I'm responsible. But I was born in 1931 in a little town, little rural town, and it was just right before the war. You remember the war started in 1934. So it brought me to the time of Depression time, when they had the Depression. If you never lived through the Depression, you don't know what it's like. You live on what the government gives you to live on. There was very little food that you could buy. And they, mostly the time the government would give out what they would call back then commodity days. You would go stand in line and they would issue you out so much food for that particular week. And it was the basic food, not fancy foods like meat and stuff like that. They didn't give that. They gave you the beans and the flour and the meal, just basic stuff to live on. We weren't the only ones. Everybody was like that because it was before the war and there was no jobs available. My dad worked on what they call a WPA, and he worked with an asphalt company doing cement with a shovel from the sides of the road, one side of the road to the other. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We had a little farm, a little cow, and an old mule, and dogs and cats and things that kids would grow up with, because we didn't have anything like TV or phones or stuff like that nowadays. So we lived in a little 4-room house, and when the rain would come, there was a little river flowed in front of our house, and we always hoped the little river would get up high enough we wouldn't have to catch a school bus. We'd have to wade across it, and you didn't want to get wet. But anyway, I went to school for 12 years and got my degree. Mama sent us all to school. We all went to school. And our biggest thing back then was church. It was so much fun to get to have a Bible, to get to go to church. Most of the time we had to walk because we didn't have a car unless Daddy would get the mule and wagon and put us all in the wagon and take us to wherever we was going. And our clothes was just bare, the minimum clothes. The way we got our clothes was my father would go buy feed for the cows and flour and stuff that we had to have. And they had colored feed sacks. They would be flowers, or like you would buy prints now on the boat. You got to go with him to pick out your dress. She made our dresses. And all of our other things that had to be made, she did all that with her little pedal machine. But we went to school, got our educations, and I finally ran into Jerry. And
Jerry Senior.
Jerry Senior. Yeah, Jerry Senior. And I had taken a job at, you got another question before I go into that?
Just go right ahead. You're doing great.
I I had taken a job at what they call the 5 and 10 cent store. And everything cost 5 and 10 cents. No kidding. My job was, I wasn't old enough to go work. I was only 15, but the man that owned the Elmore's at that time told me that he'd give me a job working, making Easter baskets in the upstairs area out of the public's eye, so I could make Easter baskets for him. But after I got 16, they put me down on the counter with the girl that was running the counter at that time. He was gonna let me work with her. She was a friend of mine. I had known her for a good while, and I didn't know that she was dating Jerry. So he came in to carry her on the Saturday night date. You didn't go on dates Saturday night. And incidentally, you didn't go till you were 16. So I talked to her about her dating Jerry, and she said she'd been dating him for a while. So a couple of times he'd come in, he'd stop and talk to me first. Well, I got to talking to him. I thought, well, this is not going to work. I'm talking to somebody that's already got somebody involved with them. So she went, that Saturday night, they went out together, and he always came by and got her up, carried her out for Saturday night. The next Saturday night, he come and got me. He had been in the future of the week, and he asked me if I'd go out with him. Well, I thought he was handsome and cute, and I was just really ready to go. And it didn't matter if she was my friend. So I went out with him, and after I went out with him, I always had to double date though. Mama Dad never would let me go unless I dated somebody else. I always had to date with somebody else. So after I went out with him, I got to thinking, what am I going to tell her when I go back to work next week? I only work one day a week, and that was Saturday, because I was going to school. And so I told her like before we went in on the couch, she said, I know you went out with Jerry last night. She already knew because somebody had told her naturally. I told her, yeah. So she said, well, that's okay. We were just really close friends anyway. So, but she was real nice about it, and I was glad because I really liked him. So I went to his baseball games. He played baseball. So I talked Mama into letting me go to the baseball games so I could watch him play baseball. I get to sit on the end of the bench where he would always bat, and I'd be sitting on the end where I could get a good look at him. I really wanted to spend every minute I could with him because I really, really liked him. So after then, he got where he'd ride the bus. We didn't have a car, but he'd ride the bus. It cost him 25 cents to ride the bus, and he'd walk half a mile down the road to my house. It was about a half a mile where he'd go to see me. So we started dating, and he'd come every Saturday night, and my daddy used to say, there comes that boy. I said, I wonder if he's going to get a wheelbarrow for y'all to go somewhere. Because he knew he didn't have a car. And his daddy had a car, but it was hard to get him to let him have it. He just would not let him have the car. So we dated for about a year and a half. I guess it was. And he was going
The other part of that is what?
going to take me. He had got his daddy to let him have the car, so he was going to let him take me out that night. So he come pick me up from work. We come down the road, not too far from where we live. He said, "We've been dating about a year and a half." I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Don't you think we ought to get married?" And that was his proposal. I've got the ring that he gave me. It's made into a dinner ring. And it's the very middle one is my diamond. And those 4 little chips around are chips from that diamond. And I'm gonna pass it around and let you look at it. It was made into a dinner ring. I got it gift my daughter, baby friend. It was so tiny. I mean, a diamond that big back then was something big. I mean, it really looked big on your finger. And so I told him he'd have to talk to my daddy about it. Well, he didn't know about that. So he got to got to the house. He said, "I believe I'll talk to your daddy." I said, "You better, because I'm going to put this ring on." So he talked to my daddy, and my daddy said with very plain words, "I have no objection, but you know where you got her, and you can always bring her back." So that made the engagement final. Then we got married, and I went and had a little job at a factory there. We got married in July of 1950, and I had a small apartment. It was very small, just a 1-bedroom kitchen and a bath. And I was so proud of that little apartment. I kept it so clean and just worked in it, kept everything in place. I cooked for him. And when I came home one afternoon from work, we had been married about a year and a half. I came home from work. There was a note on my front door. It said, "I have gone to the Merchant Marines. I'll call you when I get settled. Go back to your mama and stay with her till I call you." Well, I was just dumbfounded. He had not talked to me about it at all. So I went back to Mama's, moved back to Mama's, and he called a couple of days later. He said he'd gotten a ship and he was fixing the ship out. And he would let me know when I could come to meet him. In the Merchant Marines, you were on a tanker, an oil tanker, and you traveled from one port to another. And you had to be in that particular port if you wanted to see anybody on that ship. So I had to go to Port Arthur, Texas to see him for the first time. So I caught the bus and went out there, and he came in port that weekend and shipped out for 2 more weeks to go to New York. Here I am in a big city, country girl in a big city with nobody you know, and he's gone 2.5 weeks. Well, it was awfully lonesome, especially leaving your mom and daddy and just getting married and everything. So I decided I'd go get me a little job and go to work. So I went to work at Woolsworth with the understanding that I had to be off when every time the ship was come in port. Well, sometimes it'd come in Houston and sometimes it'd come in Galveston. You just had to be, in other words, I lived out of a suitcase for 2 years. He stayed in 2 years in the maritime service. And in 1953, I got pregnant with my daughter. And he learned to come in contact with alcohol and gambling. And he
Kind of the theme moves.
gambled a lot, he drank a lot of alcohol when he was on the ship and during the times that he was in port. And at that time, he wouldn't come in very often for me to see him. So when I got pregnant, he decided he'd get out of the Merchant Marines and we'd come back home. Well, he did, and we moved back home. And my mama, we moved in with my mom and daddy. And he went to work and worked 2 weeks, and they called him to go into the Army. So our daughter was born in September, and he left in May of the following year to go to Germany for 2 years. So he was gone for 2 years, and he missed most of her growing up. He didn't get to see her first steps or her first words because he was gone. So he wasn't around her a whole lot, and I'm not too sure, never will be too sure, that he was really ready for children anyway. So it was just me and her, and I built my life around her. And until he got out of the Army and came back. And when he came back out of 2 years out of the service, he had to reunite himself with a different wife and a child. And he couldn't do that. He would have a problem with it. And it caused him to drink more. And I was going to church, trying to teach her and live a Christian life. I had been a Christian all my life and had never been out of the church. And I asked him to go to church with me every time I got the chance. And he never would. He was Baptist. And he never would. He believed what a lot of the Christianity, but he never would offer to go out with it. So I told him that I wanted him to go to church with me so she could be involved in things. Well, it just wasn't in his book to do that, so he joined the deer club. It was a club that hunted deers, and they spent the nights out in the mountains, and he would come in. He was working with Tom's Peanut Club, though, at the time. And he would come in, and he'd go from one weekend to another weekend before he'd come home. And I'd ask him to go to church, and he would always say no, he wasn't going. He wasn't going to go. So finally I thought, well, maybe if I had another child, that it would help. Maybe he would. I was looking for answers, and I had a lot of questions to why he was acting so. So I got pregnant with Jerry Jr. And I thought, well, after I found out he was going to be a boy, this is what's going to set things off. It's going to really make a difference because he'll have a boy then that he can grow up with. So Jerry was born in 1960, and he was so proud of it. And I thought definitely that we would make contact as Christianity and have a Christian family. But it didn't work. He he would go with him and he'd take him fishing. Mostly we rode a boat. And he'd take him to a few ball games, but most of the time I was the one that had to do all taking ball games and band practice and things. He would spend most of his time at the club on the weekends. He'd come in on Friday and he'd leave out Friday afternoon or early Saturday morning. He wouldn't come back till Sunday night. Well, I was really getting to my roots end with it, so I had really thought about leaving him. I really had. And I thought, no, I've got 2 children and I don't want to break up a home. And my wedding vows kept coming through my mind. And I love him. I love him. In spite of all he's done, everything, I forgive him and I loved him. I just wasn't even going to think about it no more. So he got where he would take Jerry Jr. after Jerry Jr. got big 10, 11. I guess he was 11. He would take him riding on the peanut truck with him. He would fill the baskets up while his daddy went in and filled the racks up. And I found out that he was leaving him in the truck and going in the bar and drinking on afternoons when he'd get through with his work. He'd leave him sitting in the truck. So I finally asked Jerry about it. And he said yes. He wouldn't lie about it. That Daddy would go get a beer or 2 before they come home, which I knew he was drinking when he come home. He always smelled like a beer bottle. And I could tell it from the minute he got off his truck if he had been, which naturally he had been, because he had just got so attached to it, so he just couldn't do without it. But in 1968, I had talked to him so much about the Bible, and he would know I read it, and I'd talk to the kids about it. And we read the Bible together, and we went to all the youth activities then. Jerry was involved in all the youth activities. So I went to church one night, pick him up after one of the youth rallies. And I told him, I said, I had talked to him on 2 or 3 different occasions, so that I had thought about leaving his daddy because I just couldn't take it anymore. I thought I had just took all I could take from it. So I'll never forget it as long as I live. I told him, I said, I'm going to leave your dad. I said, I'll put up with his drinking as long as I can. And he looked at me with 2 brown eyes, and tears rolled down his cheek. He said, Mama, don't leave my daddy. My daddy's a good man, and he's going to change. And I thought, how can anybody with that much faith let something not bother them, and here I am letting it bother me. So I told him then, I said, son, I'm not going nowhere now, I'm not going nowhere tomorrow. I'm never going anywhere. I'm going to stay with your dad for as long as he lives or I live. And I said, no matter what he does or how long he does it. He said, Mama, just keep praying. He said, we just pray. And said, things will change. Well, we'd been doing that all the time, and I was thinking, well, God's not hearing my prayers, I know. But that wasn't true, because in 1968, he was baptized. And that very night, he held on to the back of the bench as long as he could, and his knuckles were turned white. He held on so tight, trying to keep from going down to be baptized. And he looked at me and he said, if you'll help me, I'll go. I said, I'll do all I can do to help you. So he went down and he was baptized that night. 2 little happy kids.